and welcome to my talk. Mosses are actually really interesting. I'm Sadie Francis, your host. I'm a trail ambassador with the Friends of Wissahickon, and I'm uh, pretty new to mosses. I've been looking at them and studying in the park for the last couple of years. So usually I'm out in the park crouching by the side of a path or hanging off a wall, and people stop and ask me, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And I say, "I'm looking at mosses." And they kind of look disappointed and move on. Well, this is unfortunate because although mosses are small, they're actually quite diverse, beautiful, and mysterious to a point where most mosses don't even have common names. And the ecosystem services they provide are comparable, if not sometimes exceed those of the larger, more so-called charismatic species in natural areas. So just because they're small, it doesn't make them insignificant. And just because they are primitive, it doesn't make them simple. So I wanted to introduce what mosses are. They comprise one of the three groups of bryophytes, which are essentially the first terrestrial plants in the history of this planet, along with liverworts and hornworts, which I know almost nothing about, so don't ask me. They are different from vascular plants in that they lack the plant version of the circulatory system. That's what we mean by a vascular system. They lack stems, they lack flowers, they lack seeds, and even roots. You can find liverworts as well in the Wissahickon. I think their favorite spot is by the old water fountain on Forbidden Drive, up in the north of the park by the Chestnut Hill section. It's continually wet there, and they love it. But I wanted to show in this slide how widely speciated mosses are compared to the other groups. This is a gross approximation. Most people don't actually know that. So that's 10,000 to 12,000 species in the moss group alone. Moss grows everywhere from Antarctica and even in some deserts. I saw a few growing in a high desert in New Mexico when I was there not too long ago. In some ecosystems like tundras, mosses can be responsible for the majority of species diversity there. Like I said, in the Tree of Life, bryophytes pop up at the transition from marine ecosystem to land, which occurred roughly 500 million years ago. But since plants like mosses don't fossilize, it's impossible to tell. But it's very likely that at about 400 million years ago, there were plants that were very, very similar to the mosses that are growing all around us today. We can and we should think of them as living fossils. The bottom line here demarcates plant innovations or inventions, however you want to call it. So the important part here is the cuticle. It's a waxy cover on each cell, which prevents these cells and thus the plants from drying out. The sporophyte is the other innovation, which is a mechanism to disperse the spores. They're versions of seeds. You notice that vascular tissue and even roots are up here, and they were innovated much later. And the new kids on the block, the flowering plants, didn't evolve until much later, about 145 million years ago during the Cretaceous. And they're all the way at the bottom here. So I'm just going to gloss over this, but since this is Moss 101, I have to mention moss sex and reproduction. It's really, really complicated and weird. And earlier this year, I had a botanist spend 15 minutes explaining it to me. And when I peppered her with follow-up questions, she kind of just faltered. So I just have to appreciate that. My point, primitive doesn't always mean simple. So the leafy parts that you see when you look at a moss are actually the gameophytes, or the sex organs. They produce sperm and eggs, respectively, and the sperm look pretty similar to human sperm. They have little tails, and they require water to move from one place to another. when fertilization occurs, which is right here, a sporophyte starts to grow, and the spore cells divide and mature within the capsule. When mature, the sporophyte will release mature spores in bursts. You can actually see them if you want to experiment. If you see a collection of them up in the park, you can run your hand over them lightly and a little cloud puff will appear. I can't get a decent video of it, but it's fun to try. So here's a good picture of the male or splash cups. These are the male organs that contain sperm. You might see little black material into each one. These ones look pretty empty, so this is probably after a rain event that we came across this. And here are maturing sporophytes. These pictures I'm showing you, by the way, they were merely taken with a 10 times magnifying hand lens in front of an iPhone camera lens, super low tech. So you can see it's like a little cap or hat, as I like to call it. As the sporophyte matures, this hat cap will pop off. So here's my partner showing the proper way to look at a moss. This is a 10 times hand lens. You can get these online for $2 or $3 each. They're sometimes called jeweler's lens. And you have to hold them really close up to your face. A lot of people don't get that. Again, moss don't have roots, so it doesn't hurt them to pick them up. Just put them back when you're done. Or if you want to do it a favor, you can place it in a spot free of leaf debris. The leaf debris is the bane of the moss. You can find moss anywhere in the park that's free of leaf litter, which falls on them and blocks their ability to photosynthesize. So you can find a spot on top of a rock, on top of rotting logs or tree trunks, and often we find them right at the edge of the trail. Here's one sporophyte coming out of what he's holding in his hand. So the beauty of moss is that they can absorb up to 20 times their weight in water. Sometimes they're so soaked you can squeeze them like a sponge, and they retain this water and at times release it, releasing huge amounts of water back into the ecosystem. And because of their antimicrobial properties, they were used as bandages as recently as the First World War. Habitat. A surprising amount of critters depend on and live in mosses, including the charismatic and cute as a button water bear. If you don't know what a water bear or tardigrade is, do yourself a favor and look it up. You're welcome in advance. A whole other talk, John, could be done on water bears or moss piglets, as they are also known by. Side note, also, if you're looking for a good TV show to watch, the first season of a new Star Trek series, Star Trek Discovery, prominently features a space water bear as a character, and it's worth a watch. I squealed like a child every time it came on screen. This is I can't believe I found this. This is an old Friends of the Wissahickon trail sign that somebody thought of as a joke, I guess. So this is from Robin Wall Kimmerer's Gathering Moss. She's famous now as the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, but she is a bryologist. She studies moss, and her first book was about moss. All of these critters were found in one muffin-sized piece of moss, and some of these are mites and weird creepy crawlies, but they're in really important parts of the food web, and we shouldn't belittle them just because they're microscopic and they have a lot of legs. Here's some other quick cool facts that are actually pretty mind-blowing. So mosses can dry out and go into hibernation state, and no one knows how long they can survive this. They can maybe survive hundreds, maybe thousands of years. They get rehydrated and they just continue to photosynthesize and trek along like nothing ever happened. As long as they have water and sunshine, they are photosynthesizing. It doesn't matter what time of the year it is. they can go to seed in the middle of the winter. And they're possibly the biggest collectors and storers of carbon on the planet. For this alone, we should celebrate them. Seeing this more and more, it's like live moss walls are being installed in institutions and office buildings. They're starting to be more common because they're super low maintenance. They're beautiful, and they actually clean indoor air more efficiently than most other plant species or even air filters. So we're going to show you some of the pictures my partner and me took. This is all from the Wissahickon. We're showing you this. This is one of the more common types of moss on the Wissahickon. These red stems are old sporophyte stems. So you can appreciate the beauty and diversity. Many times you need them to be in sporophyte phase, or you need a real microscope, like putting a piece of it in a slide under like 100 times microscope in order to identify a species, but there's no pressure to understand them that way. Identification is only one way you get to know and appreciate plants. So when you're looking at mosses, you're looking for the general form, whether they grow upright or prostrate along the ground, leaf shape, mid-rib characteristics. This is another one that's super common in the park. You can see the mid-rib up here. So like I said, a lot of the defining characteristics can be found in the sporophytes. What their cap looks like, they have little teeth underneath once the cap comes off. Otherwise, you need to pluck off a leaf and look at it really closely. This is a polytrichum commune. This is, it doesn't mind disturbed soil at all. So mosses and lichens are sometimes one of the first pioneers to come in after soil has been disturbed. So you can find these in certain areas, even in the Dora Meadow, and they can be several inches tall, quite tall actually. Like, kind of reminds me of a tiny conifer forest. This is a Mium hornum. Look how cute. So Neum is just Greek for moss. That's all it means. So they weren't, a lot of these guys weren't very imaginative in naming these things. And as I say, most of them don't even have common names. So if you want to come up with some. Here you can see the leaf edges are toothed. You can see that they don't alternate, but they match sides. Just some characteristics. You can see the midrib on this one. Some of them don't have midribs. Some of them have midribs that don't go all the way up. This is Walnut Lane Bridge, I think, and we haven't been able to identify this one. We don't even know. But these are the immature sporophytes popping up. We took this one not too long ago because you can still see the caps on them, the beautiful red stems. Just trekking along right by the side of the trail. Again, you can appreciate the diversity of mosses. This one looks completely different from all the other ones. This is like a red stemmed one. There's like a fern leaf mosses. There are feather leaf mosses. There are what they're called broom mosses that look like the bottom of a broom. There's a pincushion moss that I don't have a picture of right here, but it's pretty prevalent in the park, and it's kind of whitish and it looks like a pincushion. So people call it pincushion moss. Looks totally different from the rest of these. Some of them look like tightly braided cords, the leaves of some of them. This is another one we haven't been able to identify, with a mix of mature sporophytes with and without caps. So this one's about to bust its cap, I think. And over here, even though it's not in focus, these caps would have teeth on them, which are very sensitive to humidity. So as the humidity goes up and down, these teeth will open and close and let spores out. This is an especially beautiful one that we haven't been able to identify, but look at it. This again is an old sporophyte stalk. Go in here, we think the new growth is this reddish pink color. And yeah, this is, you can see this with a 10 times magnification glass. Just stop to look at it. Plagioneum is also a very large genus. You can get an especially good look at the midribs on this one. Some mosses are only 1 cell thick, so you can look straight through them. You can see probably what a comfy habitat that would be to so many critters. So here's some further reading if you're interested. This is probably the best field guide there is for Northeast mosses. It's by McKnight. And again, I mentioned Gathering Moss. It's not a field guide, but if you want to know more about what she calls the cultural history of mosses and her meditations and ecosystem function, you can pick that up. It's really small. It's a fast read. This, if you want to know more about moss biology is an area really, really laden with jargon. We have an entire book that's just a glossary of terms used in bryology. So prepare yourself for that, but you don't have to get too steeped into it. A lot of fields have work that way. So if you want to learn a little bit more and see if you can explain moss reproduction to me, go check it out. This is Outstanding Mosses is a cute little field guide. All the illustrations are hand drawn, and it's really good and light if you just want to grab something and take it out and look at it. So each of these books have different functions to them, but I just encourage you to, next time you're in the park, to slow down and maybe we usually, when we go anywhere, we take a hand lens with us, because you never know what you're going to find, or at least a magnifying glass. And just out of curiosity, take a look at it, thank it for all the work that it does, and you will probably see me out doing moss walks in the future, because we like to show people and we like to try to identify these things together. And I don't know if you want me to provide contact info or anything. I don't know. But that's it. Thank you for joining me on my moss journey, and hope to see you in the park.